Good day everyone, so hope you're all doing really well. After hours of playing through the Fontaine region, I'm ready to give you my review and impressions of the region. I think honestly it's been really good and very positive, but of course there's a couple of good and bad things that I want to point out, as well as how the playthrough was from a Kokomi mains perspective. I obviously use Kokomi for a lot of the overworld exploration, beating up enemies as well as taking pictures of course, and I think there will be a couple of unique insights that I can give to you in this regard. In any case, as you can see on screen, here are some of the timestamps, so please feel free to hop around in the video. The timestamps will also be in the video description below. So let's get into it. First of all, the overworld exploration is really awesome, and I want to talk about the land first. So you get the land and then you get the underwater or the lake exploration. So with the overworld and the land, I actually found it to be the stronger part of the exploration, precisely because it actually felt really fresh and easy to navigate. In contrast with Sumeru and Inazuma's vertical cliffs that you need to scale, the exploration and the slope that you have to ascend all of these mountains actually makes it incredibly easy for you to get a lot of vertical height, but without expending as much stamina. And that's what I really liked about this region. It felt open, it felt vertical, it felt like there was a lot packed into each of like the little terrain and areas, but it didn't feel overwhelming. It didn't feel like it's going to take me too much time or it's becoming a slog like the Sumeru Desert. And that's what I really think makes this so good. It felt like I got a lot of content, but it was kind of pleasant to explore it. And with the changes in global illumination settings that the devs have given us, the scenes, in particular on the western side of the map during the afternoon, were just so pretty. So if you were to take some of the Kokomi pictures near the beach in air quotes or some of the shorelines of the lake, it looks really good. I can honestly attest to this. And I think that's what made me so happy, that the overworld and the land was so good, and then also the inside of the caves and so on were not that complicated or difficult to traverse. They were easy to get to. You got changes in scenery that were really delightful, the Melusine village and some of the other areas, and I think how it integrated with the environment was really well done. So from my perspective, I'm very happy, and I think as well as the fact that we've got a lot of the world quests that provided you with new scenes. You can see there was a pink image, you had the apocalyptic image, you had some of there were really lots of unique scenes that we haven't seen before in the game, and I felt like as a Kokomi main, this just gave me ample opportunity to slap on Kokomi's burst, to take multiple pictures from multiple angles, and this is sort of this type of thing you would have only seen in like limited time events, but now it's integrated into the world, and I was really happy looking at it. It just gave me much more to do. It just meant that the environment itself wasn't an add-on, but it was more fundamental to the experience. Right, so let's talk about the underwater exploration. So this is where I think things become a bit more controversial for me. Basically, the environment and lighting was really well done. I think I loved the vibrancy and the fact that even during the evening, everything still felt alive underwater. I think Hoyo did a good job there, and in contrast to what a lot of people are saying, I think they've had the right amount of marine life and marine animals in there, precisely because we're swimming in the lake, not a sea. I think a lot of people might be expecting expansive coral reefs and seas of fishes, but that's not really what this is. I felt like you had enough breathing room, if I can put it that way, where you can really appreciate all the distances and beauty, and yet you can also still engage with the environment inside of it. So from that perspective, the lighting, the immersiveness of it, I think that was really well done. I think Hoya put in a lot of effort, and it's one of the best that I've seen implemented for many games. Now here's where the disappointment for me starts. As a Kokomi main, my character has a passive that is supposedly supposed to reduce swimming stamina by 20%, and as you can see on screen, it works when you're swimming, and then the moment you have the blue bar, it doesn't work. But in both cases, these actions mechanically count as swimming by the game. It's registered as swimming. We can even prove that there are certain mechanics like ruddering along, so that's where you just press the forward button at different intervals, that do not behave the same under the blue stamina bar and under the yellow stamina bar, but who under the yellow stamina bar does not count with or work with Kokomi's passive. What I'm really trying to get at is there's a technical argument that can be made that the action of swimming, as we can see it mechanically in the game and how it's registered, should reasonably apply to Kokomi's passive and Beto's passive as well. So that is something that I was disappointed in, and most notably because you're going to spend like 2-3 hours underwater, so having a 20% stamina reduction would have been quite significant. So that's my first disappointment. My next disappointment is the fact that we cannot dolphin jump out of the water, and this to me I think is unexcusable. I think all the characters in the game should have it, precisely because the game registers this as a jump action. This is literally now the Honkai Star Rail equivalent, where your character cannot jump except if they're from Fontaine or the Hydro Traveler. So that in and of itself just means that you can't get to certain oculi as easily, you can't board certain boats, your traversal along the surface is not as even or as smooth unless you use the Fontaine characters. So for me, a gameplay mechanic like that being region locked is not a good idea. But enough of that, let's talk about the underwater combat. So the underwater combat to me is also a bit of a hit or miss. I like the fact that it's a simplified and new way of playing the game. What I felt is that the combat itself is not unique enough. So it's all about saying, well, here's a fish, you grab its ability, and now you can either do slashes, little voice under the water, or you've got a shield. But what I would have loved about this very simplified combat mechanic is a triangle system. So basically imagine you had that shield beats slashes, slashes beat voice, voice beats like shield. A triangle system here where you could have multiple abilities that you could use, all tied to a shared cooldown cost, and multiple enemies to engage in, and having your attacks being effective against some and not others. I think that is the complexity and the depth to the combat that I really would have loved to see. Other than that, the combat and how it ties into the exploration does get a bit trivial, if I'm really honest. It does feel like, okay, I've seen the gimmick and now I have to live with the gimmick. But that's just my feeling. I've not really that sold on it. And I think in particular, one of the criticisms that I have is that this combat mechanic, especially in caves or in very close quarters and caverns, can actually lead to a bit of nausea, precisely because the field of view of you as a player is changing rapidly in an enclosed environment, and if you're swimming vertically up and down, left and right, this can induce nausea. And I'm saying this as someone that plays my game with the extreme motion blur setting on. So for me, nausea in game is not a problem, but after 10 minutes of fighting with giant crab in a little cave, to have nausea set in just means that there is something wrong. So they should definitely try in enclosed areas to zoom out the camera or keep that distance a bit more fixed. This is all feedback that I've given the developers in any case, but in my experience, it's not nice to be able to be forced physically by the game to stop playing. That's definitely a good experience. In any case, that's what I have to say about the underwater. I think the puzzles and all the ways in which they've done it, included it, that's all fine. I mean, that's just standard Genshin stuff, nothing to write home about. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about in Genshin is the idea of region-exclusive mechanics. So basically, we have the Numia or Osia, whatever I can't pronounce some of these names, I'm sorry. You have these mechanics in the game, which obviously in the overworld your character can take, but what's disappointed me is that your normal characters will not be able to take advantage of some of these mechanics if they're going to be included in the Spiral Abyss. Now, for me, as someone that has a C6R5 account, these mechanics literally made no difference because I can just kill the enemies. In fact, it's quite nice to have slightly thicker enemies in the overworld, but I do see a future where if you don't have these mechanics, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And my big complaint about this is that if you give region exclusive mechanics to certain characters, then there's got to be a corresponding drop off if you take those characters into other regions. But that is a game design philosophy that I prefer. I always prefer a sort of balance or a counterbalance to all these things, but I think let time play it out. I do think a lot of people would eventually start finding these things to be annoying because their current characters in progress does not matter. You have to get the new shiny gimmicky characters. So I did not like that at all. Speaking of combat, I do find that Fontaine is hitting a lot harder. So as a Kokomi main, this is really awesome because having your healing tied to your elemental skill means that it's just easier to heal. So for me, I do enjoy the fact that they're making the enemies a bit more challenging. And by extension, they are slightly lowering the values of stuff like shields, and obviously having lower health characters like DPS characters being on field for too long, you have to now play a proper team game. And I like the fact that Fontaine is getting a bit more hostile. I hope they don't nerf the enemies. They've done this in Inazuma, they've done this in Sumru, so expect 4.1 everything to be nerfed because a lot of people are going to complain about the difficulty. But I like that, and I like the fact that we have 2 super bosses in the overworld. It's a shame they are only of the hydro element that have got a permanent hydro aura on them, because that does ruin some of the fun, especially like for your Neo Bloom teams, because you're generating less cores and so on. And obviously it then favors characters like Linny, who's obviously pyro and can then vaporize off of it, typical Hoyo. In any case, so the overworld combat, not too bad. I can see how it can become a problem for a lot of characters, but that is what I have to say about that. And then I think finally let's talk a bit about the Archon quest and what we saw there. So from my side, I really loved it. I think this was the best Archon quest precisely because you had more player engagement and involvement in it, in the story. And that's what makes this a bit different from just sitting back and watching a cutscene. Whilst it was limited, and I think they could have done a bit more with the sort of engagement, it certainly is a step in the right direction. The writing has been a lot more solid than in the previous regions. There are a lot less obvious plot holes that I feel like, oh, okay, this is a problem. And I think overall you can see that they've really tried their best to polish out Fontaine and its writings, hopefully to attract people and to just give the game a bit of love. It did feel like with the whole Honkai Star Rail releasing and with some of the things happening over in Honkai Impact, that Genshin has been neglected. So I'm happy to see that the devs are back to the usual cadence. And I think this is where I really want to start wrapping up this review by saying that I hope that the devs would really start putting in more and more effort into the game. Stuff like giving you unique birthday like wishes from your favorite character, or having your characters text you or interact with you in more creative ways, more ways in which we can bring all the characters to relevancy in the game. All of these are ideas that I really wish the game would implement. There's so much potential, there's so much you can do. And yet, Hoyo is insistent on running a formula. And I ultimately think that Fontaine might potentially run out of steam a lot sooner than even Sumru did if they don't spice it up in some way. And I think the current way in which they're trying to do it with the uniqueness of the Fontaine mechanics and gimmicks is not the right way to do it. So hopefully the story can carry it, but I think after 4.2, the dead patches are going to hit really, really hard. So from my perspective, I want to see this game grow. I want to see things go really, really big because we've seen this in the other titles. I've played Honkai Impact the third now for a year, and the love that they put in for every single character is just, it astonishes me how we can be so spoiled with those characters and yet we get nothing in Genshin Impact. So this is on the way and the team. But in any case, guys, that is my feelings and thoughts about this patch. I know this is a bit of a longer video than usual. If you've made it up until the end right here, do check the code here on the screen. This is an Amazon gift card code. Send me a private Twitter message, and hopefully you will be the first one to redeem it, just as a bit of a reward for those of you that do actually stick around to watching the video in its entirety. Alright, thank you so much for watching and have a good day.